Hello everyone and welcome to today's live stream where we now have a set mesh normal node, which is very fun and will allow for many very nice effects. And also we have inline sockets, which we'll get into later. But yes, let's go over this quick setup here. So what this setup does is that it sets the custom normal of the mesh according to another mesh. So here we get the other mesh's normal, non-interpolated normal. This is also new, the actual true normal of the mesh. And then we'll go and sample the distance and basically mix between these two and put it onto the mesh normal, making this very nice liquid metal effect. One caveat with this setup though is that, since it's not taking into account the distance according to the plane normal, on the bottom it also interpolates like that, which can look a little bit weird. But that could always be fixed later, but it is slightly annoying to get like the proper mesh signed distance field. Well, maybe that could be... Maybe I could look into adding that to the geometry proximity node. Though that may be a little more trouble than it's worth. But yeah, that is what's currently available. So what are the uses for this node? What I've seen people do in the past is make like trees, where the branches of the tree blend their normals into the main trunk. So let's go and try that out. So let's go, do I automatically generate the tree, or do we just manually make like a tree stump and then do all that? I think let's try it manually just to demonstrate this. So let's move this up. I'm sensing a little bit of lag, and I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe it's just Eevee doing its thing again. But here we'll just set shade smooth, and let's remember to ignore... That's odd. Shade smooth? Okay, there we go. Yeah, that's good enough for me. And then we'll just go and duplicate this a few times as if these were branches. Again, a very basic and simple test, just because we want to try this. Actually, yeah, let's try a more procedural approach. Okay, let's do something really basic, but I'm going to distribute points on faces, and then we'll go instance on points. So here we'll do that and that. Let me make sure that the audio is all working. Yes, it is. I did not accidentally mute myself, which is very appreciated. But there we go. Let's have the rotation apply there and then scale these down by quite a bit. And then set the amount to be like maybe 1. Yeah, that seems to be good enough. Though I could use the poison disc. Actually, I actually don't know the pronunciation for that, so I probably really screwed that up. But here we go. We have a ton of meshes right here, and then we do have the main one in the center here. So let's go and set the mesh normals the way that we did it right here. So let me just go and copy you, because I don't want to set it up from scratch. Actually, no, let's set it up from scratch. So let's go and realize the instances, which we can see here. The inline sockets are making this much smaller, which I appreciate greatly. And then here we will go and set the mesh normal. So in this case, it has several modes. Like here, we can just set like the sharpness, all that good stuff. Let's see here, maybe, is that super visible? There we go, we can do that, or we could do that. And then we can set it to be free, which means that wherever it's oriented, it'll be an object space, I assume. And then tangent space is just tangent space. So the object can deform, and the normals will also apply. So there we go. What is the difference between normal and true normal? Let's take a look at that. So here we should see, here is the normal. So this one is the smoothened normal, while the true normal, in contrast, is exactly the same. Why is that exactly the same? Oh, wait. In this case, this is because it's, I think, defaulting to the point domain. In this case, we can see that's like that, and then if we do that, yeah. So the normal, if you have custom normals, it will use that with this top part right here, and then the bottom part will be the actual normal of the geometry. On the face domain, it'll just output the face normal. If it's on the point, it'll do the point normal, but it's best if we showcase this after we warp the normals. So let's go and set this to be free, and then we should see a better demonstration of this. So combine X, Y, and Z. So here we should see, this is output here, right? So here, there we go. here we can see that the normals are all facing upwards, which makes it look like these have absolutely no shading. So if we look at the normal here, we can see that's just showing the set mesh normal. But if we use the true normal, it is exactly the same. And then, okay. So if it's on the face domain, it'll show the actual one there, and then here, yeah, okay. So it has to be on the face domain. That makes sense. Yeah. I'm just slightly confused as to why it's not showing like the interpolated version. But yeah, that's something that I need to look into. I did not anticipate that. Okay, so back to what we were doing. Let's go and sample the nearest surface to get the normal of the main trunk in this case. Let me also go and put some frames around so that we don't have to deal with some annoying node trees and such. So if we connect U into the value and then have the value output here, we should see that the branches will now show the same normals as the main branch. So let's join geometry right here. We can also see that the join geometry, thanks to the inline sockets, is extremely small, which is very cool. But here we can see it looks like everything is fusing into the center, which is exactly what we wanted. Though at the ends, we should make it taper to the regular normal. So again, this is if you want like a tree with, let me go and disable the animation on that. If you want a tree with branches, but their branches don't look like, you want to make them look fused to the sides. So there we go, let's go and do that. You know, a very, very organic looking tree right here. But yes, and now to mix them, let's go and use mix. I highly recommend using node groups if you're actually making something like this, because right now it is getting very messy very fast. Okay. And then we just want to sample, get the geometry proximity, which fortunately there's just a node for that. Not a custom node, just a regular node. Let's put this right here and put this up to here. So now we can use a map range to decide which is which. Like when does it use its regular normal and when does it use the mesh normal. So here we can see that's looking rather good. Maybe change this to smooth step to make it a little bit easier of an ease. Let's go and change this because I'm not a fan of how bad the branch looks. Let's go and remove all of these rings right here. You do need geometry for it to actually, there we go. We need geometry for the normal to apply to, because it sets it to the, in this case, the point, but it could be the face or the face corner. I think, let's set this to be tangent space, which in this case, I believe this is always in the face corner domain. But here we can see it is a little bit iffy at the moment, so we could try to hone that in. But the main thing is we want more. Here, let's move this up. Nope, not that. Move this up so that it'll be like that. And then we could put in a few extra rings so that, again, we just want it to look fused to the surface when it can, and when it can't, well, oh well. Actually, that is a reason for us to go and do that. There we go. So now, at the very least, it somewhat shows. Let's darken that by a bit and then turn down the roughness. You know, very basic, nothing too flashy right here. But we can see that now, even though it is very basic, it looks like it's actually fused to the trunk rather than just floating. Which I've seen people do this in Houdini, and I'm very happy that we now have this in Blender. Yeah, that's the basics right there. Very hastily done, but hopefully, yeah, I should have just moved this over here like that. There we go. See, that's not too bad. Just takes like 5 minutes of setup. And wow, we have 36 people here today. Hello, everyone. I was not expecting this, but I hope you all enjoy the stream. Yeah. Let's go and scale you down by a bit more. Yeah. Yep, that's what a tree looks like. Yep. Let's set this to 0.75, and then let's go and raise the tree by a bit more. And yeah, you know, it's not great, but not the worst. And then we can delete you. So yeah, if you ever wanted a very, very, very odd looking tree with branches, that is one way to do it. Again, I've seen quite a few people do this in Houdini, so now getting that functionality inside of Blender is very appreciated. Actually, let's turn this into like a, I don't know. There we go. That almost looks like a tree, almost. But yep, that's how we can do it now, which is very, very nice. So I'll delete that example. Actually, I'll keep it here, but just move it to another place. There we go. But yeah, that is very exciting. There we go. But yeah, I think in cases like this, like I would need to get the accurate mesh distance so that it would mix accurately. In that case, you just need to get the dot product of the mesh normal. Yeah, okay. I need to make a very solid mesh SDF node that'll output like the normal and the distance, and that would be a very good node to have inside of Blender by default. Can you create the edit SOP node from Houdini so that you can have edit mode in node graphs? Oddly enough, someone asked for that last time I streamed, and at the moment, I don't think that's all too feasible in Blender's current state, but in the future, I think when lists become a thing, I believe that's coming in 5.0, which is the next Blender update after 4.5, I think that would, in theory, be doable. And there also are, like, node tools, but yeah, there is, that is for the future. I don't think I can implement that now because that has to do with storing a ton of values in memory and all that fun stuff. Yeah, that is very out of my league at the moment. I think some people... I am not a proper Blender developer. I do not know C++ officially. The only thing I do know is, oh, here are some interesting code blocks. Let me just mix them around and then implement them. Which, by the way, I did not create this node. This was made by the developers, which is very nice. I do have nodes that I'm still working on, and right now, like the scene info node I'm still working on, that one is, it only needs the dependency graph to be fixed, which is a much bigger ordeal than that sounds, but then that one may be able to be implemented. And then also the instance bounds node, that one was much more painful than I originally expected. Simply because, I could not use one of the built-in functions. I had to go and hack it to pieces and then implement it so that the instances would not be modified when you would get the instance bounds. Yeah, let's look right here. So here we can see that there are some errors, and I think that's just because there's not enough resolution to support that. We can also always go and edit the mixing here. But we can see in some cases it's a little, you might have to give it a bit more of a buffer to make that angle look a bit better. There's only so much you can do without actually moving the geometry and just setting the normals. But in that last like 10% with like the tree trunk example, it helps significantly. Because again, let's go and disable and enable, like look at that difference. Even though these are rather low poly, we can see that that heavily helps the situation. Let's actually go and throw in a subdivision surface modifier onto here, and also delete the bottom part right there. Oh, that is a bit better. Look at that, yeah. That is significantly better than it once was, even though, like with the shadows, it's a bit iffy. Let's go and check out, oh no. Oh, let me go and enable cycles. So add-ons, where is cycles? Cycles render engine. Oh, that's interesting. I thought it was enabled by default. Okay, let's go to GPU compute and then take a look at this. And then add in a sunlight. Let's see how the normals work with that. Now in cycles, this should work a little bit different. Actually, wait a minute. The thing looks a little bit off. I wonder why. I know, that looks way off. Okay. So I did something wrong here. Let's take a look at the, well, if we set them to be free, nope, that, no difference whatsoever. Let's take a look at you, and then... Yeah, what is wrong here? Ooh, it is lagging a bit. Do you feel that? Wow, that is really bad. Doing this. Okay, now the lag is gone. That is very odd. Anyway. So here are the normals. We can just go and look and see if the normals are good or horrible. But they seem to be alright. Like, the mixing may be an issue. Which, there probably is a better way of actually doing the mixing, but... Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming they're all normalized before you put them in. Yeah, there is no difference there. Maybe I just need to narrow it down a little bit more. Maybe that's because it's coming from the surface. That is interesting. Maybe I need to evaluate this on the point domain. Look at that. Nope. Pretty much no difference. Okay. Maybe I just need to change the range so that's not as, like, harsh. Or maybe flare out this part a bit more. But yeah. So many things. Yeah, it's just a little bit weird. Maybe it's because of the internal distance with all that. Let me just put in a few more layers to that just to make... Yeah, no, something is somewhat wrong here. Set that to be 0. Yeah. But it does look very nice over here. I'll need to look into that a little bit more. But yeah, cool stuff. But yeah, what else should I do right now? Because we have 40 people here, and I did not prepare for 40 people being in the stream. Oh god. But yeah, that is that. Let's see, what else was merged this last week? I think, okay, let's go over to the inline sockets. So now, as we can see here, the stored named attribute node looks a little bit smaller than before. As we can see here, the geometry sockets are now in line rather than this one being here and then another one being up there, which is very appreciated. We saw also that the evaluate on domain node also got inline sockets. Many nodes got them. And perhaps more will get them in the future, but it's a very nice update where everything is just much more clean and aligned than it was before. Because in previous setups I would have, it would, like, all the node lines would be like this, and that would be very annoying, but now they're just aligned, so now you can have tons and tons of stored named attribute nodes all in a line, and they look perfect, perfectly lined up in that way. But yeah. Side note, but is this music a Balatro OST remix? Yes, it is. Let me get that. It is Balatro 5-4 jazz cover in the style of Dave Brubeck's Take 5 by Anything F744. Very nice. A very nice remix. I found it. I was like, ooh, that sounds very nice. It would be very complimentary to my streams, which is why I'm playing it. Let's see. That makes such a nice node. This is beautiful. Yes, I am very happy that this node now exists. Oh, cool. I did not know this node was coming. Thanks. Yeah, I'm very happy that this node has now arrived. It was I forgot how long it was in development, but it is very nice to have it. Yeah, what are other things we can use this for? We did the tree branch. We did the kind of T1000 style. What else? If you have any suggestions, let me know. Again, I did not plan for this stream to be more than like 30 minutes, and we're at 18 minutes, so we still need to fill in a little more of the time. Yeah. Oh, and that's interesting, seeing that part happen. Let's test this in cycles again. So let's go and take a look. I don't know why the GPU is disabled. Actually, wait, no, I do. That is that preferences. System, let's go to, oh, which one is it? Let's use optics. Yeah, okay. There we go. Okay, now we can use this and have okay performance. So we can see in cycles that has a few more errors, which is interesting. And I think that's just because since cycles is ray traced, I'm assuming when you edit the normals it freaks out a bit more. But editing the normals is much more for like real-time applications because the surface, you know, normals are usually heavily edited in game environments. I guess also in ray traced environments, but yeah. Try fur. Yes, that is also a very, yes, thank you very much for asking about that. So here we go. Let's go and, yeah, how would I make this work correctly? So let's go and have a, well, let's clear the geometry nodes and just make a ton of planes on top of the sphere. So let's use a distribute points on faces right here so that we can get a lot of, I don't know why that lagged. Let's set this to be 50. That is a very good example. So, and then we instance on points. Instance on points. There we go. And then I'm going to go and get a nice plane that we can like UV map and all that fun stuff, and also align this. So we'll put this right over here, taper the end a little bit. So that'll be our fur plane. And then here we'll put this right over to there, and then afterwards we will realize instances. We will do that, and as we can see, we have tons of planes. Let's set the rotation to be like that, and then rotate our plane of choice to be 90 degrees, pointing up, apply the rotation, and now we can see that we have all of these planes right here. Let me go and turn this part down a bit, and then we can rotate the rotation so that we can move the fur. Let's go and do that. There we go. Let's set it to be local so that we can, yeah, that's looking much more like fur. Let me also go and turn on the cavity shading, which they move that to the bottom, which I need to adjust to. There we go, see? So this is like our fur sense, and then after everything's realized, because of course you want to deform it later, you'll want to edit the normal. Again, if you want to like export fur to like a game environment or something like that, this is essential. So let's go and set the curve normal, or set the mesh normal. There we go. And we will set this to be in tangent space, because if this is deforming, we need it to actually track rather than it being free. Okay, and then all we need to do here is use a sample nearest surface once again. Let me just put this here to separate the geometry. Again, treating this like a node group, which node groups are amazing. I need to use them a lot more. Let's go get the normal, the mesh normal right here, and then we put that into there. And here we should see, excuse me, it is not exactly applying, which is a little bit odd. The instances are realized, and that's like that. Let's set this to be free, just to make sure it's actually working. Maybe that's because the cavity is not... no, okay. The cavity does not seem to use those normals exactly. I think that's because it's in screen space. But we can see now the difference here. One is just like that, and then with it enabled, it's sharing the other normals. Let's go and set the material, because I still need to get used to this. There we go. So here, let's go and disable and enable. Yeah, here we can see a very big difference between the two, which is very nice. Again, if you wanted fur, that mainly just affects the silhouette. Again, for like real-time environments, this is the way to go. So let's put another rotation here so that I can randomly rotate these on the z-axis. So we can see that, and let's just go and add in a random value node to affect this in different ways. I think in this case we'll do it to 1 and -1, just to make it a little bit more random, but we can see that, again, it's using those normals well. So I'm going to turn off the set material node, and then I'm just going to put up a quick fur shader on this plane. Not geometry nodes, we want a fur shader. So here we'll do that. Let's actually not make it metallic, and make the base here also not metallic. Let's go and duplicate you as well. Maybe bring it down so that it's a bit darker. Turn up you as well. So we'll go over to here and try to copy those to a degree. So let's just go and use the UV map to go and add in a little bit of fading at the end. Feathered fading at the end. Let's go and do that. Set it to be 2D. Separate X, Y, Z. Go and take a... Oh, here is another funny little bug. Currently, if you try to use Node Wrangler to set the output, it will just go and set a new output. I have a feeling I know why this is happening, and this is because of the new viewer node functionality. But yeah, it seems like that's a little bit messed up at this current time. Let's go and add in a bit more geometry to here. It doesn't, like, since this isn't exactly a triangle, it's having a little bit of a hard time with that. But yeah. Actually, I should just go and re-UV map it. But let's leave it as is, and we'll just worry about that later. Let's use a greater than node, just to... Nope, that doesn't work. Go, so we can do that, and then we can just linear light, or actually, no, we don't need to linear light anymore. We just need to multiply and then add. Here, as we can see, we're going and modifying that, and I will go and use a vector math multiply to scale the texture. In this case, I want it to be kind of just like that. We can see that we're getting a nice fur pattern. And I'm going to treat this as if this were going into a game engine where all the fur basically has the same, like, UV map on it. The only weird thing is that since I scaled the ends of this, it is a little bit odd. If I wanted to fix that, then I would just reproject the UV map with the bounds and then just like feather the ends. But here we don't really need to worry about that. So let's go back into the GeoNodes tab, plug this into the alpha and take a look at the results. And take a look at the results here. There we go. So here now, this looks a lot more like fur. Now, it does seem like there's a little bit of weird stuff going on over there. That may just be because of the lighting. But yeah, we can see that if we were to turn on and off the... Let's go over to this part right here. If we were to go and turn off and on the normal manipulation, we can see that there is a very stark difference, this being basically unusable, and this being very, very usable. I think the random value is not helping in this case. Do that and then do that. Oh wait, it doesn't like it when it's reversed. That makes a good amount of sense. The normals are having a difficult time when they're viewing the other side. So in theory, if I were to put on a solidify modifier, which I don't really recommend in this case, we can see that, yeah, it's looking a lot better. I'm assuming that there's something I can do in the shader to make that work using the back face part, but yeah. Here we go. Again, let's do another little example. Again, off, on, off, on. Looking very, very nice. Now, I think if you wanted to do this without actually, like, this is good for like games and exporting models. Like, normal manipulation is essential when you want to export models. But if you want to do a method, actually no, this is the way to go. The simplest way is to just have a mesh and then you deform that with your armature setup, maybe by sampling the weights and then putting them onto there. But yeah, that is rather good. Again, the only weird part is that, which let me look inside of the shader editor to see what the heck is going wrong there. So geometry, let's take a look at the normal. Again, the normal, okay. It is fully inverting. So if we use the back facing and then just use, let's use a mix node and then a scale by -1, this should, in theory, work out pretty well. So here we should see something that is very, dang it. Since that's broken, I'm really thrown for a loop. But here we can see that that's looking, yeah, a lot better. So if we do that, that should be just fine. There we go. So a little fix right there. I'm not sure if that's... Yeah. No, that is normal. Is very expected. But yeah, there we go. So if you ever wanted fur and stuff like that, you can now do it easily. Let's go and make a few edits to our polygon here. set the scale. There we go. That's looking a bit better. Maybe put in a few more pieces of geometry. Even though, if you just had a regular fur texture, you can have just a regular UV map without any of this flare. Or even maybe a triangle, just a regular old triangle. But yeah, that part right there is not the biggest fan of that. So let's go and you project from view. And then, oh, that was the wrong way. Okay. And since I went to the shading tab, that was very laggy. For some reason it does that, even if it shouldn't be. Okay. And there we go. We can see that the fur is looking very nice with a very even UV map. And all these pieces of the fur are following the exact same texture, which you can't really tell, which is fascinating. There we go. Let's turn off the overlays and then boom. Now you can do that, which is very interesting because I'm sure most of you watched the Nintendo Direct. Silk Song is announced for 2025, which I'm very excited for. But there was the new Donkey Kong game, which I was looking at the fur and I was like, it looks like they used that technique, which is very, very interesting. And very expected, to be honest, but very interesting nonetheless. Yeah, what else can we do with this? We can turn up the shine. Like, look at that. If you ever wanted wet fur, that would work very well. Again, changing the color. Yeah, let's just take this to its natural conclusion, where we just put on some cool colors and stuff like that. Actually, let's use a hue saturation value node. And then in this case, we will use the Y, put that into the factor. I'll copy you and put you there. I may need to invert that, because if we go and take a look at this, yeah. So let's do a 1-, which is how you easily invert a float value. So now the center will be darker and the other parts will not. That's looking very nice. Now the core of this is still a little bit iffy in that case, so we can just go and set that to be whatever texture we want. Oh, did you see that glitch when I turned that off? That was weird. Yeah, look at that. Since it's not truly 3D, we still get like peeking in between those parts, but that's fine. But yeah, that is looking very, very nice. And we can still use a regular bump map on top of this, which could look very nice. So let's go and try that out as well. So let's go and put this into frames, try to make this a very nice looking shader. Let's go and put this down, just collapse a lot of this. There we go. Also, inline sockets may be coming to the shader editor, but there aren't too many nodes that can have that. So, yeah, just keep that in mind. So let's, over here, let's take the noise, put this into a bump node, and then we can go and put that into into this part. So again, it is a little bit odd that oh, wait a second. That freak out a little. Did that disconnect? Huh? Why did that disconnect? Wait, what? That seems to be a little bit broken. It seems like there are a few somewhat broken things in this update. That is interesting. Huh. Okay. And again, I should mention this is the alpha build of Blender 4.5. A lot of things will need to change. Oh, and the bump node got some different stuff as well. Oh, how about that? I'm assuming this is, let's see. Filter width in pixels used to compute the bump map for direction. For most textures, the default value of 0.01 of 0.1 enables sub-pixel filtering. Sorry, everyone. For stable results, for stepwise textures, a larger filter width can be used to set a bevel-like effect on the edges. Oh, that's very interesting. How about that? How about that? Nodes keep getting larger, but this, I think quite a few people will appreciate that. So here, if you want to set a little bit of bump right there, that's looking very nice. And since it's using the regular bevel, the regular normal as the input, that will work very, very well. Look at that. Yeah, that's looking very nice. We can always go and turn up the amount of like noise, how much the noise is affecting all that. That's looking pretty good. I think I do prefer it without it though, but it's not bad. No, that looks okay. You want to see... Yeah, let's see it on the monkey head. Right here, it's geometry nodes 0, 2, which, again, name your geometry nodes, but in this case, you know, I'm just being lazy. So let's scale it up. Wow, why is that lagging? Yeah, we can see that. Let's go and change this to the kind of darker base shader. The fur is looking a little bit, let's go and scale this up by 2. Let's see, that's looking a bit better. Now, there are quite a few things to the fur. I just think that they're not quite wide enough. Yeah, but we can see that that's mostly working okay. Let's check this in cycles as well, which we can see it's having a very, very lovely time with the amount of alpha layers right there. Let me just go and add in an HDRI real quick, so I'll be right back while I go and get the file path. If you have any suggestions, please put them in the chat. Let's see, where did I put all the HDRIs? I keep forgetting to pin. Actually, no, since this is a new build, Blender, it forgets that. So let's go to textures. Here we go. Let's do the full res HDRIs. 1 second, everyone, while I go and find a good one. Let's see. Let's do the 4K one right here. There we go. Let's boot this up. That's a nice HDRI. Let's go and disable the sunlight because that will just be applied by the HDRI itself. We can see that that's looking fairly normal. Not as good as when it was when it was an Eevee. I think just because the planes having ambient occlusion and stuff like that wasn't quite looking the best. But it is pretty good. I think Red Dead Redemption 2 does similar with fur. That, I would assume so. It seems like most games do something like that. I think it's the bump map that's throwing me. I'm not quite liking the, yeah, it's looking better. Yeah, it will need some refinement, but it is looking quite good even as is. Let's see, let's go into the geometry node tab. Maybe I just need to angle it a lot more. Let's go and take a look. Oh, that was weird. Yeah. We can see that that's looking pretty good. Again, normal manipulation, it's a classic thing, but now that we have in geometry nodes, it's a very appreciated change. We can even go and, like, angle this part a bit more, set the shading to smooth. Well, even though that doesn't change a thing now that we're setting the normals somewhat manually. We do something like that. Yeah, there we go. That's a bit better. Just one more face, just making it look a lot less 2D. Then there, right there, since it all just spreads out from that area, there's a little gap. Yeah, that is looking quite good. Let's go to the shader editor and then play around with this a little bit more. Let's go and turn this up by a bit. And I could add in a random offset to the UV based on a random value per instance. So if we get the object info, counter to what you may expect, the object info node works per instance. So if we go and do that and set this to be like, let's do 100. Let's go and collapse U. Hide alt, whoops, that was a mistake. There we go, right there. We can see that all of these now have a different texture, a quote-unquote different texture. It's the noise texture, but effectively, it's random per each one. It is lagging a lot more than it should. There we go. Let's go and turn this down by a bit. So here we can see that this one is just up, down, but it is randomized for each one. Let's go and turn up the roughness. That's looking mediocre. So let's go and tone that down by a bit. I mean, it's looking okay. Maybe it just needs the actual, like, bump to work. It's looking okay. Looking okay. And I think that's all that's needed for this little test. We could add in a little bit more, like maybe a color ramp to fade the color. Actually change that rather than just darken it. So let's go and do this. And we can just put in another one here. So at the ends it has a lighter tips to the fur, but let's go and just change it a little bit. Let's do something like that. I mean, that's not bad. It's looking a lot more natural. Yeah, not bad. Actually, I want to desaturate this to see what it would look like in kind of a yeti fur context. Oh, yeah, that's okay. Actually, let me get my human form out here. Oh, that's new. Got all those. Wait, were those always in the regular asset library? Anyway, let's go and get the human form right there. And let's go back to the outliner. Oh, I keep forgetting. This is one thing with Blender that I always forget, just the scale of it. Because, like with this cube, you kind of expect this, or I expect this to be a 1 meter by 1 meter cube. But this is 2 meters. It's a Minecraft cube, it is a 2 meter wide cube. Just because Blender deals with radii of 1 meter instead of diameter of 1 meter. So right now, this monkey head is the size of you, as tall as you. So if you envision that in the room you're currently in, that would be huge, absolutely gigantic. So same thing here. I don't know why it's recalculating like that. Looks like they're changing some things with Eevee next under the hood and maybe the viewports or the viewport overlays. But yeah, some funny stuff is happening with that. Okay. And also, it doesn't seem like that's why the ray tracing is not applying. So let me go and set the good settings for this. Turn off both of those. That seems to be fine, and then you want to set this to be 2 meters. Yeah, that seems to be the... Wow, it's so noisy. Eevee Next is very noisy. We can keep on temporal accumulation, but turn off bilateral filter, because that looks quite a bit worse with metallic materials. Wow, this is laggy. Whoa, this is extremely laggy. Not sure if you're seeing that on camera, but... lag spikes galore. Okay. So what were we gonna do? Yes, turn this guy into a yeti. So let's go and copy. This will be GN fur. Let's go and do that. So let's go and bring you over to there. Geometry nodes. We can turn off shades. Oh, nope, dang it. I'm getting a lot of lag right now. A lot. So let's go to GN fur, duplicate you, and then change the effective scale of this. So we'll set this to be like 200 on the fur side, and then we'll change this to be 0.1. No, that needs to be significantly smaller. Yeah, that seems to be all right. And we could also capture, like, we don't even need to sample the original surface. We could just capture the normal here and then pass it through. I think that would also... Does that work? Not sure if that is. Maybe we need to actually capture it beforehand. Yeah, we may need to just capture it so that the data will do its conversion. No. Well, let's just put it here anyway. It'll be fine. Yeah. So here, let's go and change this to be like 0.3. I feel like I need to make the fur wider because it just doesn't feel wide enough. Then for the material of the original geo, let's just go and bring that down. Oh yeah, we are missing out on a lot. There is not nearly enough fur. Oh, let's set this to be 2000. There we go. So we can see that's looking a bit more like a yeti, but yeah, it still needs a good amount of work. If we were to scale this by 2 on the x-axis, that's looking a little... Yeah, no, something's wrong. Let's see, why is that looking wrong? Because... let's scale this by -1. Which one looks better? I'm seeing essentially... Oh wait, no, I wanted that to be y -1. Nope, that looks a lot worse. Okay, let's go and bring this up by a bit. Yeah, so you'll need a better fur texture, but you can see the vision here. You can... Oh wait, is that also just because it's using the... Yeah, okay, that's better. Since it was set to flat shading, it would do that, and now that's looking a little bit better. There's still some weird stuff happening right there. Let's go and change this up by a bit. Oh, there we go. That's a lot better. It was just too angled in this case. So now we have a fully functional Yeti. There we go. And then with the shading, once again, and this should not have geonodes on it. It doesn't need it, so we won't put it on. Let's go and turn up the value at the center. If we keep it to 1, we can see that, oh yeah, that's just like that. But a little bit of faked ambient occlusion goes a long way. Here we go, not bad. And now we can try scaling it on the x-axis again. That's a little bit too wide. Like, if you had an actual texture, you would want to feather it at the ends, but in this case, don't really care all too much. But yeah, this is fine. And again, that's with the set. Let's do a comparison with the normals. Them being set and them not being set. Again, tangent space, so this is now compatible. If the fur were to deform, it would still work just fine. Let's go here and turn it off and on, off and on. Go, see that, and that, that, and that, that, and that. Which is pretty good, if you ask me. Only other things I can think of to change is like making this an actual triangle, rather than kind of oddly proportioned quads. But that's fine. But yeah, there you go. And then let's go into the shader editor once again, and we'll change the scale of this. Look how blurry that is with Eevee next. Extremely blurry. Does that help? No, that does not help. If we turn off the ray tracing... No, okay. Wow, that is extremely blurry. Probably the shadows, if I had to guess. No, the shadows are at full resolution at the moment. It's very, very blurry. Okay, anything else that I should do? We go and look at the offset per... Wait, is that an offset per thing here? Let's go and put this into there and see if it's actually... Oh no, it's real... Oh, I forgot. It's all realized, so this doesn't do anything. I forgot about that. We could store a random value per segment, so that's pretty simple to do. Let's go back onto you. And then in this case, we can just store it right here, not even on the instance. We can just go right here, set a random value. We'll just set this as random and spell it correctly this time. Again, the inline sockets are very, very appreciated with all this. Let's go and remove you. Again, trying to keep this rather simple. Go. There we go. Not too bad. And this won't apply for the other one because, well, actually, no. Let's just copy this into there. So here, we'll just go and plop this right into there, and it'll work just fine. Let's see. It's there, put this there, and now if we go into the shader editor for our little fur piece right here, we could go and use the attribute node, and then put in random right here. Well, random. And since all these instances are realized, we do not need to set this to the instancer, just keep it on geometry, hide the unused inputs, and now we should see that yes, when we change this, all these offset by a different amount each time, which is a lot better. Let's go and do this, and then we can go and fade this to an extent. That's pretty good, set to 0.25. Could be a bit more though. That just doesn't quite feel right. I always have trouble making fur that looks good, because it always ends up looking too spiky, like this. But yeah, it's getting there. We could also put in another thing right there. And I think it's also because the fur isn't tapering, because of how we set up the UV map. But that could always be changed in the future. A little bit of taper at the end could probably help. It's alright. Not great, but it's alright. I'm gonna go and change the UV map by a bit just to see what it would look like if it was all working exactly as intended. This would need more I should do this just in the shader so that it doesn't have this very weird triangulation issue. But I could go and just subdivide it, and it would fix all my problems. Not well, because you don't want a high poly count when it comes to fur like this. But as we can see, it is looking a little more like fur. Let's go, why is that happening? Let's go back to GeoNodes, go back into the shader editor for the fur, and we can just go and make this a little bit different. And I think another thing is that you want more fur layers, like curving and intertwining. But in this case, I don't have that. So it's gonna just look a little bit iffy. Because fur, it's not straight like this. It curves. Yeah. Could I... maybe it would be a good idea to put that in. And then I could just turn off the subdivisions and all that. But we will see. I think the blurry thing comes from the fast GI approximation. Oh, you could be right, yeah. Well, just the denoising and stuff like that is very... It's very blurry in general, which Eevee Legacy was never like this. Yeah. Eevee Next still has some areas that could grow in. Let's try a sunlight. And turn up the sun by like 10. We can see that the shadows are still 100% accurate, which isn't bad. I mean, that's completely expected. The normals do not affect like where it hits on there. But in this case, you know, you could always just turn up the subsurface scattering. Again, some game engines have that as well. Oh, it is lagging a ton. Let's set this to be 1 meter. Turn it up by a bit. So yeah, that's looking very soft. And even if the normals weren't modified, it probably would look good just because of the subsurface. Actually, no. Yeah, it is helping. It is helping. So yeah. It is now a viable option. Look at that. That looks very, very soft. That I would say that's pretty successful. Let's go and try to take it to one last change to see if we can take it to the next level. I'm also still slightly annoyed with just how big, how absolutely gigantic. Wow, that is so laggy. Why is this build so laggy? I am a little confused by that. Like, well... Oh, no, wait. It's, for some reason, it's recalculating whenever I move it. It's not the build, just for some reason it's recalculating when all that's happening, which I'm confused by. But yeah, let's go and turn off that part. So when it moves, it should be only a little bit laggy. And let's go and project this from the view so that we can get very even UV maps without any weird triangulation stuff happening. And we could get rid of that. We could get rid of both of these so that we just have the fastest method ever, but I don't think we need to do that. Let's go back over to here. I know I'm ping-ponging a lot between different things, but it is perfectly fine. Let's have another noise texture in order to warp this noise texture. So in this case, we will have a duplicate noise texture right here, and then we will just add to the vector, and then use a vector math scale node so that it'll do that. And as we can see, if I go and turn the detail down and the roughness down, I'll make it a bit faster, but we just want a general little warp. Different warp for every single one of these so that the... Oh, that's looking pretty cool right there. Now there will be disconnected segments, but we can see that the fur is doing a nice little twist. Is exactly what we want. Now everything is not just the same, it actually looks like fur, which is very, very nice. And we can go and eliminate that. Again, this part right here is just so that when you're looking at the underside of the fur, it still looks okay. The base normals are still exactly the same. There we go. All that seems to be pretty good. Just the normal warping, or not the UV warping right here. And there you go, you have a very nice, basic but nice fur shader. Good, again, turn this up even more. We can see that's clipping, so we could bring this down by even more. Just whatever feels right. That doesn't quite feel right, let's go and do that. That feels the best. So yeah, that's what you can do now. Actually, let's not do that, let's set the saturation to 1 and all that. Yeah. I am liking the Yeti look quite a bit. But yeah, that is that. So normal editing can be very useful in situations like these. If you have a tree, if you need to blend objects together, or if you just need to make or fake like subsurface scattering. So many amazing options. But yeah, I think that's it for me for today. We are almost at an hour. But yeah, new nodes. So again, just to review for people who joined in late, the new set mesh normal node is now available with very nice options. Again, right here, you can also remove the custom normals, which is very nice. So right here, we can see when we remove it, some weird stuff happens, but if you just set the edge sharpness, you should be just fine. But yeah, so many cool things are available. So go and play around with it, see what you can make, and that'll be good. And inline sockets are also added to quite a few nodes, as we can see here, making everything a lot more compact, and it just looks very nice. But yeah, that is it for me for today. Am I missing anything else? If you can bear with me for one more minute, I will go and check the changes in this past week. Let's see, what else changed? Let's look at the commits. Let's see. Yep, free custom normals was added yesterday. That is very, very cool. And then there were a lot of other commits with other things, which maybe I can't go over all of them right now. There's just way too many. I'm just scanning for the GeoNode stuff. Align sockets was done 2 days ago. Very nice. Then anything else that I missed? Nope, that's pretty much everything. I might miss a few things, but that's pretty much everything with GeoNodes. For this week, or at least this half week. The camera info node, as I have stated before, is now in main. So this one, which I made, but had a lot of help with the developers for the dependency graph issues. This is also in main Blender. It will be in Blender 4.5, which I'm very happy about. Again, I'm very grateful for the devs. And also, for those of you who missed the last stream, the import nodes are also in Blender. They've been moved out of experimental. So all of these are now available, and so many cool things can be made with them. So I'm looking forward to see what you all make with it. So yeah, many amazing things are coming in Blender 4.5. I think this will be the most loaded geometry nodes update in quite a while. So many, like there's been so much groundwork laid, and now the nodes that can be made with it are now being implemented. So it is very, very, very cool. So yeah, thank you all for watching, and I'll do one last read of the chat before we go. 40 people here. Wow, that is a lot more people than I was expecting this stay. But yeah. Is this the main 4.5 alpha branch or a different one? This is the main branch. Yes. Let's see. I never realized how severe the size thing is. Yes, it is just, that's why I just have this base mesh, which funnily enough, this was based off of a scan of myself. Using an Xbox Kinect probably like over 5 years ago at this point. I was just like, you know what? Let's just go and decimate it, make it a nice little low poly model. So now it's just a very nice size comparison for everything else in the scene. 5 years ago, wow. I wonder if I grew since then. But yep. Everything in Blender is a lot bigger than you would originally expect. Because again, Minecraft blocks are big compared to humans, but this is twice the size. This is a 2x2 Minecraft block situation here. Again, this is 1 meter. Again, compared to a human, because most humans are not over 2 meters. But that's 1 meter, and then the default cube size, as we can see here, is bigger than most humans. So yeah. Once again, let's read the last bit of the chat. Is Blender 4.5 implementing the node noodles which you posted in recent shorts? It is very awesome. Those were just a test. I should make that abundantly clear. The devs were interested in that. They contacted me about those node links. And unfortunately, I don't think I can implement them well. They would be amazing though, because they feel a lot more clean. than the current Bezier links, but the reason Bezier links are implemented in all node-based programs is just because they're easy to implement and they're good in many situations, in most situations. Like in this case, they just work very well. While with the angled ones, while they look good, the problem is the vertical segments. Because if you had multiple nodes lined up like this, they would straight up overlap, which isn't great. I've tried many methods to try to compensate for that, and just none of them worked well. So at the moment, Bezier links are the way to go, and to implement those angled links, you would need more settings in the preferences, which would be annoying. You would have to implement a new shader for the node links. I couldn't just edit the bevel shader, or the Bezier shader. So it would be a lot more painful than what it's worth, just because if I could figure out like the vertical segments and making that not be an issue, then maybe I could try implementing it, or with a lot of help from the developers. But at the moment, it's just, unfortunately, it's just not worth it, because it's just not it won't fix everything. So at the moment, reroutes are the way to go. But if I could figure that out, then maybe. I've tried 45-degree angles, so it would go... Let's get the annotate tool out real quick. It would be like this, that, and then that, which worked very well with lots of aligned segments. So that worked out well. But the problem is when the nodes are close, then in cases like this, it would just like be clamped, and then the same issue would arise. So unfortunately, that is on hold. But it was a cool experiment, and also the devs got a good laugh out of the catenary, the hanging node wires. That was pretty funny. But yeah, so it would be cool. Like Houdini I checked various other programs. Houdini just ignores the vertical alignment issue. It just has that issue, and it just doesn't get dealt with. So yeah. Like, if it were easy to implement, then I would be like, oh yeah, I'll try that out. But there are quite a few things that are just barring me from actually doing that. Another thing is that these curves are made out of 24 points, and I don't think that could be turned up. But in some cases, that could look very jarring. Especially, like, in cases where, with this, you would need basically an entire circle. So one arc here, one arc here, one arc here, and one arc here. But that would look very low poly. So, yeah. It would be cool, but unfortunately, I don't think that would be it would not be worth the effort for an okay result, but it's just not good enough. Okay, so once again, I'll read the last thing in the chat. Let's see. For the noodles, look how circuit board traces are made. Basically, this is what you need to make. I did look into that, but that needs to know what other links are there so that they can collide, and that would be a lot more trouble than it's worth. Like, I don't want to actually see, oh, what lines are around and then move them based off that. That is just way too complicated for what it's worth. Because in this case, I don't want this node to have to like collide with this node. It would just be super painful to implement. So yeah, Beziers are okay. Maybe there are other options I could look into, but for the time being, Beziers are Beziers. I keep forgetting how they're pronounced. Please bear with me, I do not know French. But yes, thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you next time, hopefully with some cool developments. But yep, have a good one.